Pum, 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 pum. Ezra! Joyful celebration. Ezra chapter 6, verse 16 to verse 22. Jesus, you're amazing. Thank you for creating a world with even flavorful spices that we can throw on meats, cheeses, vegetables. Spices alone should be a testament to just how great you are. They even think about something like that where food can be just made more flavorful. You are good. Thank you, King Jesus, for partnering with humanity, for hanging yourself with our partnership. And thank you, you just you don't relent. You went in love and mercy, longing for us to turn our heads, holding back. Luckily, your mercy is always before judgment, and you're always holding back, waiting for mercy. There is a moment when mercy has run its course, but right now it hasn't. So we thank you. We pray for the people watching the stream that they also see the goodness of your mercy, cling to you, see you as wisdom, life, abiding in life, abounding in it. That's where you are. So we hear and look to you, look at your good news, read this 2,000-year ancient testament. It gets so confusing. What the heck's going on? What is this even? Why? Why is this here? This is your testimony of how you partner with humanity. So we thank you. May the hopes of the ancients be our hopes. Because we know the hopes of the ancient was for you, our Mashiach. And thank you for coming. Thank you for proving to the world that you exist. Amen. The Israelites, the priests, and the Levites, and the rest of the exiles performed the dedication of this house of God with celebration. For the dedication of this house of God, they presented 100 bulls, 200 rams, 400 lambs, 200 rams, 400 lambs, and 12 goats as a purification offering for all Israel, according to the number of the clans of Israel. They set up the priests in their divisions and the Levites in their groups for the service of God in Jerusalem, in accordance with what is written in the book of Moses. The exiles made Passover on the 14th day of the first month, because the priests had purified themselves, and the Levites altogether were pure, all of them. They slaughtered the Passover offering for all the exiles, for their brother priests, and for themselves. The Israelites who had returned from the exile, and everyone who had separated himself from the defilement of the nation and the land to join them in inquiring of Yahweh, the God of Israel, ate. They made the flatbread festival for 7 days of celebration, because Yahweh had made them celebrate when he inclined the mind of the king of Syria to them, so as to support them in the work on the house of the God of Israel. So right now, they made the temple, right? So what are they doing? Celebrating, having a big party, right? And then also, and they're also consecrating it. So saying that this is sacred ground where Yahweh dwells with his people. That's a good question. The flatbread festival. So during Passover char, so that's where they make the flatbread. And so it is remembering of the exile. So not the exile, my gosh. It's a remembrance of being saved from captivity in Egypt, being freed from oppression. No, but they didn't use They didn't use leavening agents, which means you know how bread usually has it rises. They didn't use agents to make it rise. I mean, you just don't add yeast or you don't add other rising agents. So like here, you could actually see flatbread at the store all the time. Mm-hmm. So let's look at some. So here you go. Here's so yeah, matzah makes me making me wanting some bread. The couple I referred to, and let me just take off my jacket. So I'm starting to feel toasty. And when I feel toasty, I feel sleepy. That makes me want to listen to Approaching Nirvana. Toasty! The couple I referred to in connection with Ezra chapter 5, verse 6 to 17 often say that they cannot believe the wonderful thing that has happened to them. The man never expected to find this new love a couple of years after his wife died. The woman expresses her astonishment with more feelings because she had been on her own for years, and she knew that statistically it was unlikely she would find someone. At least find someone else. At least as significant was the fact that she went out with men from time to time, but could never imagine making a commitment to one of them. And then whoosh. When she wasn't looking, she met this guy with whom she soon knew she wanted to spend the rest of her life. And miraculously, she felt the same about her. God's accomplishment of the impossible demonstrated that's what she had settled for as a life that was good enough, particularly in light of the mistakes of her past life, was sadly inadequate compared to God's vision for her. The celebration in her hearts and the celebration in their friends and families' hearts was a delight to share. The temple dedication aroused feelings of this kind in the Judaic community. Psalms 90 may help us share them. And people have been consumed by God's anger. It says, the anger that Tetina's letter in Ezra 5 shows they recognize. They know they deserve that anger, and they have been living under God's wrath and thus with trouble and sorrow for 70 years. Maybe it will become 80 years, the psalm speculates. The returned exile now know that the exile has not done so. They have come back. The time of wrath is over. Psalms 30 in turn makes that point. The psalm's heading suggests it was used for the temple dedication, even though it expresses itself as a speaker. It is an individual who once felt secure as a recipient of God's favor, then saw his life collapse and seemed to have descended to the depths of the realm of death. But God did not leave him there. He has proved that God's anger lasts only a moment, but his favor lasts a lifetime. It doesn't feel like that when you are on the receiving end of God's anger. But the experience of God's deliverance puts the experience of trouble into perspective. Weeping may last the night, but celebration comes with the morning. God did not let the psalmist's enemies rejoice over him. God has turned his wailing into dancing, taken off the gloomy garb he was wearing, and clothed him in party clothes. Such would be the testimony of the community that had returned from exile and was once more dumbfounded at the wonder of what God has done in making it possible for the temple to be rebuilt. There was a celebration, all right. Even this new act of dedication was less splendid than the original one described in 1 King 8. The number of sacrificial animal may seem to be a lot, but that earlier story speaks of 22 cattle and 120,000 sheep. Furthermore, there is no account here of cloud that represents God's splendor filling the house, as it did in the earlier story. Yet there is no hint that the community is disappointed by the event it celebrates or feels it is less significant than the dedication. It is indeed dumbfounded at the grace of God. Although people saw no cloud, the story implies they knew God was present to be worshipped and inquired of by them. Cyrus is heir to the old Assyrian empire that was once the agent of God's wrath. So it is as if God has now made the same Assyrians the means of exercising mercy. Another distinctive feature of this dedication festival is that it involves a purification offering, which was unmentioned in connection with the first dedication. The people celebrating are defiled. They are defiled because they or their ancestors have been involved in worship of other deities. which was one reason they were taken to exile. They are defiled because they have been living cheek by jowl with foreigners who worshipped other deities. They're defiled because no doubt some of them have been involved in that worship themselves. By coming to the sanctuary, this community would risk defiling it and making it impossible for God to be there, so the community needs purifying. The possibility of making offerings to effect that purification is another indication of the grace and mercy of God, who wishes once again to come to live among the people. Such cleansing requires the grace and mercy of God, who provides for the means of cleansing. It also requires the responsiveness and submission of the people who actually make the offering. The whole community joined in the celebration. The story emphasized that in some sense this means the whole of Israel. For its purification, 12 goats are offered, the number that corresponds to the number of the Israelite clans. I prefer the word clans to tribes because clans reflect the fact that they all belong to one family. It is a particularly concrete expression of the conviction that the claim that this community represents the whole of Israel. Ezra 4 has more realistically described the people involved in building the temple as Judah and Benjamin, the clans that belong to the old southern kingdom. But there are among them some people from the northern clans who have moved south for various reasons. So it is not quite fiction to regard the Judahite community as representing all 12 clans. It is theologically important. The community around the temple really does represent God's faithfulness to Israel in its entirety. The issue continues to be significant for the Jewish community in the 21st century, whose physical descent largely goes back to the community of people who lived in Judah after the exile, or the people who constituted the original dispersion. The building work had been completed early in the month of Adar, the last month of the year. Conveniently, this means that the temple dedication led directly into celebration Passover. A few weeks later, Passover comes at the beginning. Oh, so Char, this is good right here because you're asking about flatbread festivals and this stuff. Okay, you ready? Yeah. The building work had been completed early in the month of Adar, the last month of the year. Conveniently, this means that the temple dedication led directly to the celebration of Passover. A few weeks later, Passover comes at the beginning of the year, according to this way of counting, followed by the flatbread festival. Both these festivals celebrate the exodus from Egypt. Flatbread, bread made without yeast, also marks the beginning of the barley harvest. The people who joined in the celebration of the two festivals included all the people who had separated themselves from the defilement of the nation and the land, as well as the people who had returned from exile. Who are these people? They will include people who are not Israelites by birth, people who will later be called proselytes. The Torah is explicit that foreigners can join in Passover if they are willing to join Israel, which would involve the males being circumcised. These foreigners will include people such as the resident alien who had come to live in Judah because of some crisis in their homeland that had driven them to move abroad in this way. They will include people living in the territory of Ephraim, Samaritans who profess to worship Yahweh, who are now accepted to join in temple worship in the way they were not when they wanted to join in the temple building, and resident aliens of Israelite stock who originally came from that area. Most tantalizingly, the comment offers another hint at recognition of the presence of a significant body of Judahites who had not gone into exile. So far, the book has indicated that the temple builders were afraid of the people of the country and that the people of the country were weakening the efforts of the temple builders. Not least by bribing the authorities to stop the work, it also hinted that the temple builders may have made a rod for their own back by their tough stance in relation to these other Judahites. The theological principle lying behind their stance is that it is crucial to avoid defiling the temple, and they are concerned at the risk that these other Judahites will do so, just as foreigners would. But this account of the temple building indicates that they recognize the need to walk a tightrope in their relationship with these people, as they considered the possibility of other Judahites, as well as foreigners and northerners, joining in the festival. The key question is whether they will make sure people do not bring defilement on the sanctuary, because that will mean disaster. The community's openness to these other Judahites deconstructs any shape, antithesis. The community's openness to these other Judahites deconstructs any sharp antithesis over who constitutes the real people of God. Whether you are exiles or people who had never gone to exile, the question is whether you have opened yourselves to purification. And love, you're talking about studying baptism. That's purification. So anyone could be part of the temple as long as they went through the purification rites. And we're thusly saying, you could come from what you thought was the right group, but it will do you no good if you were in a state of defilement. Conversely, other people could come from what you thought was the wrong group, but they would become acceptable to God if they submitted themselves to God's cleansing. People who ate the Passover could include exiles, people who had not gone into exile. Samaritans or foreigners, the only question was, are they people who are committed to making Yahweh the one they inquire of, the one to whom they turn for guidance and for the answers to their prayers? And have they submitted themselves to purification for whatever defilement has affected them? All right, friend, we can start. Oh, yeah, bummer. Thanks you. Bio Project. All right, love, we're watching a Bio Project video. Just heads up. I think we're at Resurrection, right? Oh.
We've been looking at the story of Jesus as it's told in Luke's Gospel. It begins with the arrival of an unlikely king born in poor, humble circumstances.
Then we saw Jesus as a teacher, prophet. He went throughout Israel calling people to a radical way of life, where enemies become friends, the poor are cared for, where people find forgiveness for their failures.
He went from town to town inviting people to follow him and live under God's reign in this upside-down way.
And he did many signs and wonders, so many Israelites began to hope that he would rescue Israel from the Romans and set up a new kingdom of peace and justice. In short, that he would bring the kingdom of God.
Now, the religious leaders of the day were also hoping for God's kingdom, but to them, the message of Jesus was a threat.
Yeah, they had expected to gain power and prestige when this all went down. But Jesus said God's kingdom belongs to the poor, to the outsider, and that real power is serving others in love.
This conflict intensified when Jesus, while in Jerusalem, disrupted the temple sacrifices and called Israel's leaders a gang of rebels.
So they arrested Jesus, and they had him accused before the Roman authorities of being a rebel king. He was handed over for execution, even though he was innocent. Then he was taken outside the city and put to death on false charges.
This brings us to the final section of the Gospel of Luke. There was a religious leader named Joseph who opposed Jesus' execution and then requested to be given his body so he could bury Jesus in a nearby tomb.
And then, a couple of days later, some women who had followed Jesus came to visit that tomb, and they found it open and empty, and they encountered these mysterious figures telling them Jesus was alive from the dead. So they run away terrified. Nobody believes their report. I mean, he can't be alive. They all saw him die.
Now, just outside of Jerusalem, a pair of Jesus' followers were leaving the city, traveling on a road to a town called Emmaus, and they were sad and confused about everything that had happened.
Then Jesus shows up, walking alongside them, but they don't know it's him.
Yeah, that's weird. Why couldn't they recognize him?
Yeah, it's an odd but really significant image for Luke. They're blind to Jesus for some reason, so Jesus asks them, "What are you guys talking about?"
And they begin to tell him about Jesus, a powerful prophet who they expected would rescue Israel, but was instead executed. Some women say he's alive, which is crazy. It's all too much. We're going home.
So Jesus tries to explain that this is what the Jewish scriptures had been pointing to all along, that Israel needed a king who would suffer and die as a rebel on behalf of those who actually are rebels. And then he would be vindicated by his resurrection so he could give true life to those who would receive it.
But it's still not making sense. They're as confused as ever.
Which leads to the scene where they sit down for a meal with Jesus. He takes the bread, he blesses it, breaks it, and gives it to them, just as he did at the Last Supper.
Yeah, this is the image of his broken body, his death on the cross.
And it's when they take in the broken bread, that's when their eyes are open to see Jesus. Then he disappears, and the episode's over.
So this is a story about how it's hard to see Jesus for who he really is.
Yes, this is brilliant. I mean, how could God's royal power and love be revealed through this man's shameful execution? How could a humble man become the king of the world through weakness and self-sacrifice? It's very hard to see. But this is the message of the Gospel of Luke. It takes a transformation of your imagination to see it and embrace Jesus' upside-down kingdom.
The Gospel of Luke ends with Jesus and all of his disciples together over another meal, and everyone's freaking out about his resurrected body. I mean, he's still a human, but way more.
Yes, he's passed through death and come out the other side, a walking, talking piece of new creation. And then Jesus tells them that he's going to give them the same divine power that sustained him, so they can go out and share the good news of God's kingdom with other people.
After this, Luke tells us that Jesus was taken up into heaven, which is a cool exit and all, but why disappear into the sky?
So in the Old Testament, the skies are the place of God's throne. They're above everything. So this is Luke's way of showing that Jesus has been enthroned as the divine king of the whole world.
His followers stay in Jerusalem, worshiping God and Jesus, waiting for this new power, and this is where the gospel ends.
Now, Luke is going to write about how they receive this power and take the news out into the world, and that's what his second volume, the Book of Acts, is all about.
Take away, my friend. It's completely bonkers. It's still bonkers today. It was really bonkers when Jesus died and resurrected. We're supposed to kill kill our enemies, not be killed by them. Yeah, resurrection was just bonkers then, bonkers now, but Jesus did it. All right, friend, we can start.
pure and radiant. He wields love to shrive clean the hearts of men.
Huh.
There is nothing more terrifying.
Yeah. Nice.
In that forsaken place, blood must spill. Blood of your fellows,
Back.
the Earth-Tree faithful.
They were never saints. They just happened to be on the losing side of a war.
No signal.
Mother.
Huh. There we go. Just all of a sudden, my computer wants to stop sending a signal. Okay, computer. Nice. Such a bot. A bop. Huh? Oh yeah. That's that. That's game. Oh gosh, I didn't mean to load it. Beat the game. Okay, that's that for Backpack Hero. Yeah. Cool.